My name's Beckett.
My name's Jasper.
If you like this video, hit like, comment, subscribe. Join the peanut gallery.
Hey, welcome back to another episode. We're pretty pumped this morning. We have a big deal on.
Stop.
big deal. So we have Danielle Neilson on. Neilson, that's
You
right?
got it.
Neilson.
Yep, Neilson.
Right. Danielle Neilson on. She is somebody that we have gotten connected through with FCA. Mm-hmm. And so that has been really, really cool. But we're really thrilled to have you on. And I'd like to start with big deal. Tell us more. Why are you a big deal? Why is that funny?
That's funny because I'm really not a big deal. I guess I'm here because of the work that I'm doing in St. Thomas and Elgin County in my role as the Homelessness Prevention and Housing Program Supervisor. I've been with the City of St. Thomas, which is the service manager for the area, since October 5th of 2020, so sort of mid-pandemic, and loving it, and had the opportunity to connect with you by some of the work that we've been doing in partnership with Family Central Apartments. Right. And so, yeah, here I am.
Oh, very cool. Okay, so where did the nickname come from? We got to go back to that nickname a little bit. Why are you a big deal? We need to know.
It was a very funny nickname that was given to me when I worked as a manager for homelessness prevention for the City of London. And again, really funny because I was not a big deal, but it stuck. And so all of my colleagues then referred to me as Big D or BD or Big Deal. It was great.
Could be worse nicknames, for sure.
That's fair.
All right.
Are your colleagues in St. Thomas aware of this nickname?
They are not.
We apologize.
Will be now.
Yeah.
We're just trying to help. We're trying to help, right? So it's good.
It's great.
All right. So how do you get into a role like yours? So I want you to take us back kind of. How do you end up in these roles? Because in my work, at least now, I've started to realize there's a lot of these types of roles and there's a lot of things governments are doing. But why did you end up personally working with homelessness and, the various roles that you've had? So if you want to backtrack us, go right back from the beginning.
Okay.
And then we'll talk more about the role and that kind of stuff.
Okay, awesome. Hopefully I don't go back too far. If I do, just feel free to speed me up and get back to the meat. I got into this line of work because I wanted to help. I wanted to help at-risk children and youth and also around housing instability. And part of that is because I experienced deep poverty and housing instability in my childhood and youth. And so it was a subject matter that I felt I could really relate to and just had a strong desire to help. So initially, I started working with youth experiencing homelessness. That was when I was still in Toronto. And the bulk of my time in housing and homelessness thus far was with Covenant House, which is one of the largest youth shelters for youth ages 16 to 24 in Canada. I spent 17 years with them and had the opportunity to move sort of from frontline into a senior management role before we made the jump from Toronto to Elgin County, which is my home now. So happy to be a member of Elgin for sure. And when I first moved out here, my husband and I had a deal that we would both start job searching, and whichever one of us landed the more rewarding opportunity would go to work, and the other would stay home with our, at the time, 1-year-old son. And so I landed an opportunity with the City of London to work in homelessness prevention. I didn't really anticipate my career going towards government at that point in time. And it was really my experience around homelessness, I think, that won me the opportunity to join that team. And then I fell in love with it. I was able to see how broad your impact can be in a position like that where you're really influencing at a system level and found that my personal experience and professional experience both equipped me well to have an impact. And I loved the work that I did for London. But when this position came up, it was an opportunity for me to gain more experience and additional responsibility and be able to do what I do for my own community. And so it was just too good of an opportunity to look past, and here I am.
So what does education look like in terms of that? So, because before you got to Covenant House, which I want to talk a little bit more about what they do and how that works, but what courses do you take? Like if somebody's listening and they're kind of like, yeah, I'd like to get involved in that. Because my generation and younger, for sure, are very socially driven. We want to see the world better. And the older ones do too. We just maybe shout louder on YouTube and Facebook. I don't know. But there's a big push towards that. So in regards to education, what are some of the things that even now specifically, because you've got a lot of experience and you've seen different things, what would you recommend people go to?
I think first it's important to determine what type of work is going to feed your heart and soul and mind, and then look towards what educational opportunities might suit you well for the work that you want to do. For me, when I was younger, when I got a sense of the type of work I wanted to do, I chose to do a child and youth worker diploma program at George Brown College in Toronto. It's a 3-year program. And part of what I really appreciated about that program was that each year you did a placement. And I thought that real hands-on experience is probably what would prepare me best for the type of work I wanted to do, which it did. And all of my placements led to employment, which was wonderful. And then in my time at Covenant House, one of the positions I held was support program manager, and it included overseeing a culinary arts employment training program for youth. And I got to design it. The space had sort of been put aside, the funding had been secured, and the curriculum needed to be written. So I got to partner with a chef at George Brown College, and I knew youth homelessness and at-risk youth, and he knew culinary arts. And so we got together and designed this really cool program that's had incredible impact. To this day, it still has incredible impact. Like the stats on it are so high for youth employment. And it won me an award. I won an award called Vital People. I think it was through Community Living Toronto. And it came with a grant. So I chose to use that grant to go to the Schulich School of Business and study advanced management. So that was sort of my next stab at education. And then from there, once I secured the job with the City of London and realized how much I enjoyed municipal government, I then went back to school at Western and got a graduated diploma in public administration. So sort of those 3 realms of education is what's prepared me for the work that I do now, which is super helpful. I'd never, ever discredit education, but I think that it's the hands-on experience for my particular position where you are working in low-income housing and homelessness that really sort of carves me out well for the job.
So, on the one hand, you tell us you're not a big deal, and then all of a sudden you're like, I've won awards, I got... Okay, so I want to jump back a little bit, and if you don't want to answer this question, that's fine. But
no, it's fine.
So you talk about living in deep poverty. Do you have any specific things that you guys experienced in terms of people helping you that you kind of look back and go, man, that was really helpful? Because I think for a lot of us, the challenge is that we do want to help.
Yeah.
We do care. But then a lot of the things that you on instinct think, oh, I should do this, then they'd say, well, that's not helpful. And so for a lot of us, we haven't experienced that. And I'm grateful for that end. But for you, that is a big part of your story. So are there things that when you look back, are there key moments or institutions or people that you look back and go, man, that really had an impact on me?
For sure, and it's people. So I was fortunate enough to have really good people in my life where I was not in a situation to touch the system, for lack of better words. There were points in time where if it wasn't for good people in my life, I may have been in a different situation. But it was neighbors and friends and family and teachers who saw something in me. And I could see it in their eyes that they believed in me, they saw potential, they had good hearts, and extended their homes and their hearts to me. And I would say that it's the good people in my life that definitely contributed to me having a successful outcome.
Okay, awesome. So let's go to Covenant House. Because there's a lot of negativity around what the government does for social services in terms of it's not enough, and everybody complains. That's part of what we're gifted at. We're very good at noticing things that aren't getting done. So I'm curious. So now you've been in this industry for a long time. I'm curious, what are some of the awesome things that happen through Covenant House? Obviously, there's no perfect place, and we've experienced that very much at Family Central, that to the best of your intentions, nothing ever is perfect, and you're always learning because people are involved, and people are unique and different, and times change, and pandemics happen. But what are some of the things when you look back at Covenant House that they did well, that you think, this is really proud that you got to be part of?
There's a lot going on at Covenant House, the one in Toronto anyway, and they're an international organization, so I think that also speaks to their strength. Part of what's remarkable about Covenant House is that it is privately funded. I hope that they don't mind me talking about them. I don't think that they would. And the generosity is overwhelming. It's quite remarkable how many people give to that cause. And if you had the opportunity to go inside and see, you'd probably be able to understand why people are so generous. I'd say one of the remarkable things about my time at Covenant House is its appetite for evolving. Covenant House knows that it's not getting everything perfect, but it's continually seeking to incorporate best practices to create those opportunities for youth. And there's no shortage of what they will do, which is really cool. So in addition, so they have about a 100-bed emergency shelter and then a 30-bed transitional housing program. They also have an on-site high school, an on-site art therapy program, the Culinary Arts program, which I mentioned, on-site healthcare. Like it's whatever, it's full stop. Whatever a young person walking through their doors might need, they're ready to meet those needs, which is quite remarkable.
So culinary arts. We do want to get to what you do around here, but there's so many different things that I'm picking up on that because it's something we've talked about. We have a kitchen. We have a nice kitchen. We've talked about something like that. So I'm fascinated a little bit. You say it's been really positive and well received, and the numbers are good. What about the program do you think is making it so successful?
Well, part of it is that there's a ton of employment in culinary arts. So even from the start of creating that program, we looked at where the 3 entry-level industries where there were job opportunities sort of existed. What we landed on was retail, construction, and culinary arts. And then by sort of looking at them closer, we whittled it down to culinary arts for a couple of reasons. One is that it's hands-on, and there's an element of creativity that comes with creating food. The other is that it can be therapeutic. So just the process of being around an abundance of food and chopping and smelling and tasting and then giving to other people when you get to see that you've crafted this meal, but it's filling somebody else's belly. There's just a lot of connections for people, I think, and it feels good. So the way that we designed that program was that there'd be 3 stages of completion, so level 1, level 2, level 3. And so if you, for whatever reason, had other things going on in your life that would make it challenging for you to continue with the program, you could complete level 1 and feel like a success. And from there, you could enter into entry-level jobs, and the further you went in the program, the better the job opportunities became.
Okay, very cool. Well, it's something off air we'll have to talk about more because I'm fascinated by it because during COVID, I've learned to really enjoy cooking because we had nothing else to do. So you were at home.
Yes.
But it is true. There were so many of those entry-level jobs in that. And so that's very neat. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about now.
Okay.
So what do you do now? You work for the city of St. Thomas, Elgin. So
I do.
Can we start with, can you explain kind of how all of this stuff works together? So why am I talking to the person from St. Thomas about low-income housing in Elmer? How does all that tie in together? Maybe a big picture view of how all that works.
Yep. So I work for St. Thomas Elgin Social Services. So that is located in St. Thomas on Talbot Street. And it is the service manager, not just for housing and homelessness, but also for Ontario Works and for childcare for St. Thomas and Elgin County. And what that means is that the funding from different levels of government comes in through that office and then is dispersed throughout both the city and the county to try and meet the needs. And similar to what you said earlier, there's never enough. Right. So it's easy to see where the shortages fall, especially when you're looking at something like housing and homelessness. Right. So for me in my role, I oversee those different pots of funding that come in for homelessness specifically. It's funding called Community Homeless Prevention Initiative, or CHIPI. So we have an annual allocation that comes in, and I work with community partners to sort of see where the needs are and what the responses to homelessness are and create an investment plan.
So you're the person with all the money? Is that...
Well, it's not a lot of money, but...
We have a couple things we want to talk about. No, just big deal.
Fair enough. So I'm responsible for creating the annual investment plan, and my approach to doing that is fair and transparent to the best of its ability. Right. My hope is that the investment plan goes as far as it can to meet the needs in our community. And then, of course, that plan goes to council for approval before it goes back to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing for ultimate approval. And then those funds are allocated out to the service providers. They report in quarterly on what their outcomes are by way of receiving that funding and how their financial expenditures are being managed. And then at the end of the year, we provide a rolled up outcome report, again, to the ministry to let them know how the funds are being best used in our community. So that's sort of on the homelessness side related to the funding, but then I also do quite a bit of system work in the community. So we have a couple of different initiatives. One is called Coordinated Access, where community service providers in both the city and the county come together to talk about people and families that are experiencing homelessness and to try to problem solve and find solutions. So I attend that meeting and other meetings like it. So sort of from a system level, trying to apply my experience and my knowledge of best practices to ensure that we're doing the most we can with the limited resources that we have in our community, and tapping into other resources as well. For example, Built for Zero Canada is a national campaign that helps municipalities work towards ending chronic and veterans homelessness. And I'm happy to share that we became a Built for Zero Canada community in May of 2021, which is wonderful. And that comes with a lot of guidance and coaching from experts as well. So resources like that also help me to support the community. And then on the social and public housing side, we have a number of units, some that are city and county owned, others that are privately operated, privately operated by housing providers where they receive rent subsidies, often known as rent geared to income. And so we have a number of those units where we work off of a centralized wait list to match people into those housing opportunities. And my work there is really around ensuring that we're meeting the guidelines of the Housing Services Act, working with housing providers to ensure that the housing itself is meeting the needs to the best of its ability of our community. And then, of course, advocating and looking for resources wherever possible to increase our housing stock to better meet the needs of people experiencing housing instability.
Okay, so there's a ton of questions I have in my head coming from that, because it's a huge conversation right now, especially given what the last year and a half has been.
Yep.
So I'll start with that. What are you guys seeing as trends, maybe impacts of COVID and lockdowns and all that in regards specifically to our homeless and our most vulnerable?
So a couple of different things. One is that the need is increasing and growing, and it has been for many years, but specifically during the pandemic, we're seeing quite an increase in housing instability and need. The other challenging thing is that in the last couple of years, during the pandemic, the cost of housing, rent and home ownership has grown exponentially. And so now the gap between somebody experiencing poverty and housing instability and being able to achieve housing stability has widened.
Can you break down some of those numbers for us? I don't know if you have them off the top of your head, but can you break down a bit of a number? So let's say you're on any of the subsidies, whether that's disability or that's Ontario Works. What does monthly income kind of look like? How wide is that gap?
It's quite wide. So for Ontario Works, your income as a single person would be around or just under $800. What's very significant about that is that your shelter portion is only $400. So if you try to find housing in St. Thomas or Elgin County with $400, it's going to be near impossible.
And if you find something, it's going to be slummy.
You got it. And even slummy, I don't think you'll find it at the price of $400 anymore. So the interesting thing is that if you look at the number of people in our community or any community that's receiving Ontario Works, it's a very small number of them that are experiencing homelessness. So it is interesting to think about how people are surviving on such limited incomes. If you take a family, for example, their income would be higher. The amount of Ontario Works they would receive, depending on how many dependents they have, would be higher than that single amount. And then there might be access to other benefits like the child tax benefit, for example. But it is really interesting that the majority of people receiving Ontario Works will not experience homelessness.
Do you think that trend will change as housing prices continue? Is that something that just because, I mean, even in Elmer 5 years ago, you could get an apartment for $400. Like, it wouldn't be a nice apartment, but you could pull something off.
Right.
Is that something that is going to change now? I mean, the numbers obviously indicate that it will.
Right.
Or are there other factors, do you think, that play into that?
The benefit is that there's more attention to our housing crisis by higher levels of government, provincial and federal, than I've ever seen before. And so I'm hopeful that they will see an increased commitment around strategies and tools like housing allowances, for example. So you may have $400 through Ontario Works for shelter, but your apartment is $900. And other tools like a housing allowance can be used to bridge that gap. So that you can then afford your housing accommodation. So I'm hopeful that we'll see an increase in support in that way. And I don't want to be wrong on that because otherwise I think that the gap will only further widen between what people can afford and what actual rent is.
Well, and that even for the middle class, this is going to be a challenge. We've talked about this lots, and the fact that I don't know where my kids are going to live.
Same.
Like at this point, I'm like, well, I guess we'll expand our house and they'll stay at home because unless you make a ton of money, like the average house in Elmer, I was saying yesterday, we were looking at a house and it was $575,000 in Elmer. And I'm like, somehow we've gotten to a place where even that seems somewhat cheap. You're like, only $575, but at the same time, you're like, it's $575 for a house. And what?
Who can afford
not
that?
a new house. It's not it's nothing special. $575, the mortgage on that is huge.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it is a bit of a terrifying time where you're looking for federal government to kind of go, or even provincial. I don't even know who makes all those decisions, but somebody needs to do something because our next generation,
Right.
if our middle class can't even afford housing, I don't know how we're expecting our low income.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah. It's scary.
What other things are you seeing in terms of direction for your agency specifically? What are the things you're leaning towards, kind of working towards? I know we've talked about programs becoming more a part of the low-income housing part. Mm-hmm. Are there other big things that you're kind of working, you're hoping to work towards?
For sure. So in the area of homelessness and housing instability, I guess for that matter, supportive housing is definitely something we're seeing as a strategic way to help people to achieve housing stability in their lives.
So what would the difference between supportive and just low-income housing be?
Mm-hmm. So low-income housing, essentially you would be on your own. So you'd be matched into that housing. You may of your own accord have supports in the community that assist you. Supportive housing means that your housing comes with those supports. So you would be choosing to go into supportive housing, and not everybody wants to be in supportive housing, but you'd be surprised how many people through a recent project in St. Thomas actually are quite on board for participating in supportive housing. So you still very much, in a successful supportive housing model, you still very much have your independence. You make decisions for yourself. You have privacy, but you also have access to on-site supports to assist you with anything like mental health challenges, for example, or addiction challenges, or budgeting, behavioral, social. So they're all available to you on site to really help you anchor into your housing opportunity and continually grow towards that housing stability.
Oh, that's really cool.
So how's it been? Just you fall of 2020, you walked into St. Thomas Elgin, which is overrun right now with problematic situations involving mental health, homelessness, people living on the street. The downtown core is rough by all accounts, at least in some things that we sat in on meetings. I mean, you've really stepped into like really a difficult situation in terms of position.
Right.
How has that gone? Like, I mean, like, I could see why the person prior to you stepped out.
That's funny.
Right? And now you stepped into it. I mean, that's difficult because a lot of people are looking, and they're looking at you, and they're saying, hey, my business keeps getting broken into. I report it. The police come. They release them in 2 hours. And then the person's back doing it again 2 hours later. And, like, all this kind of ties in. Like, and you understand that more than most, how it's not just one person's situation isn't just independent of, you know, it's just a mental health issue, or it's just homelessness, or it's just food security, or that's complex. But you stepped into that position. How has that gone for you? Like, were you aware of the level of difficulty in St. Thomas that you were stepping into prior to that? And then for you personally, like seeing that, how's that been for you to navigate some of that? Because it's a lot of people stare and go, okay, what are we doing? And like, we understand that situations aren't like you flick a switch and all of a sudden it's, you know, unicorns and rainbows. in this type of work. Like, we understand that.
Yeah.
But people with like livelihoods and businesses and, you know, maybe they're living downtown and it's not the nicest, safest place because of needles or whatever. Like, that's tough. Like, that's a lot of pressure to step into. How's that gone for you and your family? Because I'm sure you don't leave work at home, at work.
Right. So my answer might surprise you, but it's gone remarkably well. Part of that, I think, is from the work that I did with the City of London before joining the City of St. Thomas. I was already accustomed to working in what we refer to as a fishbowl. So everything you do is examined and questioned, and often the fingers pointed at the city, like, what's the city going to do about this? So I was thick-skinned already before coming into the role. But part of why it's gone so very well is that St. Thomas Elgin is an incredible community. The collaboration and the momentum was all there already. I think that part of maybe how I've contributed is sort of, again, from that system level, just sort of supporting people to make sure we're all steering the boat in the same direction. But this is a very compassionate community. And I have found more here than in my previous roles with other cities, that there is a desire to help, and there is a desire to work together and not point the finger at one particular body. Things like homelessness and housing instability are a community issue. It's not something that just local government can fix or just community can fix. And that seems to be well understood here. So at a political level, at a community level, with leadership, with the public, in general, I find that people are understanding that it's not going to happen in a day, and excited for where we're headed. There are a number of new initiatives that are taking place over the last year since I've been with the corporation, which I think the community has responded really well to. There's street outreach services now. We also have a rural homelessness system navigator doing work in Elgin County specifically related to rural homelessness, which can look quite different from urban homelessness. And so I think a lot of that good work with the momentum and the compassion that was already here has made it easy for me to transition. I won't say it's an easy job. It's far from an easy job. For the most part, I think it goes well for my family too, but there are definitely days that I go home exhausted. And luckily, my family's accustomed to me working in homelessness. I've been working in this sector for over 20 years. And I think that I have their support, and I know I have their respect. And so I think they see it as a small sacrifice sort of for the greater good. And they know that I love what I do. And I think that that certainly helps as well. If I didn't love it, this wouldn't be a good job. But
Well, I think one of the things that we've kind of learned here is I think people authentically do not want to see people suffer.
no, that's right.
And I think one of our views on humanity needs to shift that way a little, because we, as a nation, I think we all have that desire, but then at the same time, we've shifted the full responsibility to the government. Just kind of been like, okay, we care, but we paid our taxes, you do your thing.
Right.
But going back to your story, well, it was the people.
It's the people. Yeah.
And I think we sometimes forget that. We think that people can be fixed through a program or through, even when you talk about supportive housing, one thing that stuck out to me years ago, we were working with a teenager, and teenager wanted to go to, college. Well, who signs OSAP papers for them? Who's a surety? Who's any of them? And you start going, man, you forget how lucky you are if you grow up in a house where you have parents who are like that, or you have the extended family. And
For sure.
One of the other stories I heard a couple years ago from somebody working in this field, they would go visit a specific family, and when they got there, individual just so incredibly lonely. And the comment she had made was that she really looked forward to when, the Jehovah's Witness or any of those types of groups would drop by, because then at least somebody was there. And you can't solve that with a government program.
Right.
And so I think when small community, I don't know if it's hard. It's probably harder in a bigger city. Like, I've never lived in downtown Toronto, so I'm making huge assumptions here, but it is harder when there's millions of people. Whereas in Elgin and, in our little part of the world, there's 10,000 in Malahide, something like that. And you kind of go, I think together we can solve the people's struggles. We shouldn't have homelessness here. And so it's been very neat learning about some of the other initiatives, learning about some of the things that are going well.
That's good.
It's been very cool. Okay, so you said a couple initiatives. I am curious,
Yep.
what are some of those other initiatives that are going on, that are going well? 'Cause, you know, and just a little thing, and then you answer the question. But I think people need to be inspired. I think people authentically want this to end. And so I like sharing those kind of stories. So yes, we haven't solved everything. There still is an opioid crisis. There is still some of this stuff.
Yep.
But we are heading in a good direction. So maybe we can convince some other people who are listening to get on board a little bit.
Yes, that would be great. And in terms of inspiration, I mean, one of the things I think I shared with you when we first met at Family Central Apartments is that I have received so much more than I've ever given to anybody experiencing housing or instability or even just living at risk. It's really hard to be homeless. And when you have the opportunity to work with someone side by side, you get to witness their strength and their resiliency and their problem-solving skills. And it crafts your heart and your mind, and it gives you a very different understanding of what's happening for people in our community that are in that boat. It's easy to see the behaviors related to substance use or mental health and be fearful or even resentful or get that NIMBYism, not in my backyard attitude. But if you are fortunate like I am to get up close and personal with the issue, you tear back those layers and you see so much more. And I think our humanity wants to help. Like, I think it's just in all of us. And you receive so many more rewards than that, way greater than what you would give to another person. So hopefully if that's inspiration at all for anyone thinking that they might want to be a helper, I hope that does this trick a little bit. In relation to some of the initiatives that are happening, so for the first time ever, we've piloted a rural homelessness system navigator. That's in partnership with Family Central Apartments and West Elgin Community Health Center, so sort of going on both sides of the county because it's such a large county.
Right.
And our Rural Homelessness System Navigator has also done some work in Central Elgin as well. So we're piloting it for 12 months and then having a look at the outcomes and the impact to determine what the need might be moving forward. Rural homelessness is something that's not really been very well understood in previous years, partly because the occurrences are so much less. So the urban centers end up or tend to get more of the attention related to research and funding. But again, throughout COVID, we're seeing those numbers increase in the rural areas. And part of that is because of the housing price inflation. So people who previously owned homes and rented them for a number of years, so maybe even in a 3-bedroom home for $700 or $800. Now that house has doubled in value, and so they're cashing in, which is displacing people who are used to paying a much lower rent. And what I said earlier about rural homelessness looking a little different than urban homelessness is that often we're talking about a family who's never experienced housing instability, but now they're in a situation where they've lost their housing and they can't find anything else, let alone something affordable. There's nothing out there to rent. And so now this family is potentially at risk of their first experience of homelessness. And so we've invested in a rural homelessness system navigator to hopefully catch people before they enter into that situation and provide them with support to hopefully connect to housing. And again, looking at accessing tools like a housing allowance or a Canada-Ontario housing benefit to help bridge that gap a little bit. And that navigator is seeing success. It's also hard, challenging work. So no day is easy, but there's definitely some successful outcomes coming out of that work. I know that she quite likes the work she does with Family Central Apartments here in Aylmer. And so we're hoping to see that continue and to ensure that there's enough resources there to match the need to the best of our ability.
Right.
And again, that point that there's really never enough resources, but we try.
So what is that? You mentioned a street outreach. Okay. What is that? What are you guys doing? Is that St. Thomas based? And
It is for right now. It's also a pilot. So it is being led through the Canadian Mental Health Association, who recently partnered with Addiction Services Thames Valley. And they do provide support both to St. Thomas and Elgin County. We have a more permanent funding proposal into the provincial government, hoping to make street outreach permanent in our community and with more staff. staff and then being able to sort of expand out into the county as well. But to get it going, especially because, as you mentioned, like the downtown challenges in St. Thomas, we wanted to get it going quickly. So we used social services relief funding, which was provided to us specifically for pandemic related challenges and providing community resources. So we provided funding to CMHA to get it going now through a 12-month pilot. Of course, looking for opportunity to extend that as well. But yes, we have street outreach workers that are housing focused on the streets in St. Thomas, connecting with people. The main focus of that work up until this point, and they've done a very good job, is really about relationship building and gaining trust. Many people who experience homelessness, especially if it's chronic homelessness, have multiple reasons to potentially not trust the system.
Right.
And so our street outreach workers have really just been meeting people where they're at, responding to basic needs, answering questions, matching them to resources if that's what they want. And then the hope is over time that trust and that relationship is there and they can begin talking about housing solutions.
I like it. So basically going to where they are.
You got it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It's super cool.
Because the lack of trust is such a huge thing that probably doesn't. But I mean, it's the same struggle the police are having. It's the same. A lot of government officials are having that they just don't get trusted.
Right.
Which is fine. But then there's no plan B for a lot of people. So if you don't trust these resources, where else do people go, right? So to build that, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love the preventative thing. I know with rural homelessness, prevention doesn't have the same stats that a response does. And so, like Patrick said, once you go through downtown St. Thomas, you're like, wow, they're really, and there is a lot of people that they're helping. But ideally, if, one of our goals is that if every small community would be able to deal with their own, then maybe St. Thomas wouldn't be so full. And maybe some of the people who are leaving Elmer because there is nothing for them, maybe they can stay where all their supports are. And so I think it goes back to community, it goes back to people.
Yep.
And it goes back to it's a huge problem that you plug away. And I love your attitude. And I love your determination. 20 years.
Thanks.
Well, there is. It's hard work. It really is. And I see a lot of people in that line of work that do not have the same smile you still have and same determination. And so we need more people like you in this work.
That's very kind
resilience.
of you. Thank you.
Mean it. We mean it very authentically. That we really appreciate. I didn't really know the guy before you, but we really appreciated the work you're doing in our community. And I know people like you do not get enough thanks. So thank you for giving your life to this work.
Oh, my
for
pleasure.
the work you do, and for the way you've helped us at Family Central for sure. Just looking forward to seeing what the next 5-10 years bring. And
me too.
we'll see where
I'm
it goes.
excited.
But thanks for being here. Thanks for your
pleasure.
time. Really
Yes, of
appreciate
course.
it. It's been awesome. Very informative. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Peanut Gallery, for being here and always being so awesome, too. Just feeling in a good mood today. You guys are great people. Everyone's go give someone a hug. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next one.